Good, and so it's so good to be with you all here this morning, and we stayed down the road. Your pastor put us up at a hotel down the road, very comfortable accommodations, and just very, very glad to. Probably my favorite thing about the hotel we stayed in was the air conditioning was working real great. And so I was loading up the car this morning, trying to get everything packed up in the car. And I wasn't even outside for that long. I mean, I was starting to work up a good sweat while I was out there, and I thought, I'm about to go to church. I can't walk in there all drenched in sweat. So, glad to be here, and we're just so thankful for this opportunity. And my wife and I, we have 2 little girls, and our story is very different than most missionary stories in the sense that we've done things all backwards. Your typical missionary couple, they go out to Bible college first, they meet, they get married, they go to churches to raise support, both financial and prayer support, and then they go out to the mission field, and then and that's kind of how the sequence of how things usually go. My wife and I did it very differently. We both graduated Bible college, but we both went to a different Bible college, and so we graduated single. She went off to the mission field in 2011. I went off to the mission field in 2015. She'd already been there 4 years before I got there, and so she was already a pro missionary lady. By the time I got down there, she'd already been there for 4 years. And so then we met down there and were married. And then after we got married, we went back down there, and we had no support. And after about 6 months of going back down there, we said, hey, you know what? I think we need some support. And so we went and raised some support back in 2017 for about 6-7 months. And then we went back and still didn't have any kids. But during that time, being back in Honduras in 2019, December of 2019, God gave us our first daughter, Abigail, and then our second daughter just last year was born, Annabelle. And so we've had 2 girls, and with 2 girls, you know, the diaper bill has gone up, formula, everything has gone up, and with inflation and everything, we said, you know, there's just a lot of things going on. We said we need to get back to the States and raise more support. So we had been, you know, here and there raising some support, but not anything serious. So we came back to the States last December, and we spent Christmas with my wife's family. And you know, I did not grow up in Oklahoma. I don't have any family out here except for my wife's family. I didn't know anybody in Oklahoma or Texas. I grew up in the southeast and northeast, everything out east. And so, why am I here in Oklahoma? My father-in-law, my wife's dad, was a pastor in Florida, but they ended up moving from Florida to Oklahoma City, and my father-in-law has been helping out at a church as the director of the Bible college and the principal of the Christian school. And so when they moved out to Oklahoma, I said, well, let's go visit churches in Oklahoma. I've never been out in this area in the country, so but that's the connection there. And I called your pastor when I was just calling through churches in Oklahoma, trying to get meetings. And but we were originally scheduled to come to this church back in January. I think it was one of the Sundays in January. I don't remember which one, but we were about to come, and I think there was a big COVID outbreak in this church. And so your pastor called me up and said, have you left yet? And I was actually in the middle of loading up the car. He said, have you left yet? I said, no, not yet. Just load up the car. He said, well, don't come, because we don't know if we're going to have church tomorrow. There's been a big COVID outbreak. So, which I told him, I said, well, please, I mean, you do what you have to do. You have to think of the health of people, whatnot, and so I understand. But the good thing was we were able to reschedule, and so we're back here today. And I remember that day I was loading up the car to come here. It was cold. It was cold outside. And it's funny because it was so cold when I was trying to load up the car back in January, and now here we are, I'm loading up the car at the hotel down the road, and I'm like, man, it's hot out here. And so, but and you would think, you say, but you're a missionary to Honduras in Latin America, shouldn't you be used to that, this weather? Kind of, but you know, our ministry is actually about 3,000 feet above sea level, and so that's high enough above sea level to where we get some cool air, some cool mountain air, and so that's good. But when you go down off the mountain, now Honduran weather it really depends on where you're at, how high in elevation you are. If you're really high in elevation, it can get cool at night. As soon as you go down off the mountain, you get to sea level, it gets very, very hot. I mean, you could just drive in your car a couple hours down the road, and the temperature difference is amazing. How much hotter and how much more humid it can get. And so, but anyway, that said, we're just thankful to be here. And our display table's over here. Feel free to go by our table. We have prayer cards, so excuse me, if you would like a prayer card, we have enough for everyone to grab one. And you can put it in your Bible or your fridge, whichever you open the most. And then we also have a yearbook. And in the yearbook, in the middle, it's all in Spanish, but a yearbook has pictures in it. So the good thing about pictures is they speak any language. And so you can look at the pictures of our Bible college students and see. Also, you'll see pictures of the property. You'll see pictures of our students doing different things. In the back of our yearbook, we have and this is an older yearbook. I think it's from 2018, so it's not that current. So, but from our seminary started in 2010. So from 2010 to 2018, that 8-9 year span, you'll see who has graduated from our seminary and what they're doing. And so a few details have changed. Not many details, but a few have changed. But we actually just had our seminary graduation just a couple weeks ago, and we graduated 7. So I just want to share real quick our ministry verse, and that's in 2 Timothy 2:2. 2 Timothy 2:2. And Paul told Timothy, last letter that we have in chronological order of the letters that Paul wrote. The last letter he wrote was to Timothy that we have in the canon of Scripture. And 2 Timothy, he's given his final words, his final charge to Timothy. And he tells Timothy in chapter 2, he says, "Thou therefore, my son, be strong." Be strong. As opposed to what? As opposed to being weak. And in the ministry, serving, and we see that he says, "Yea, and all they that will live godly shall suffer persecution." He says, "Be strong." And but how are we supposed to be strong? And this is the key. And this is really the key in the whole Bible. How can we be strong? He says here, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. And that is such a key. And Jesus told his disciples on their way to the Garden of Gethsemane, before he was about to go to the cross, Jesus told his disciples in John 15, he said, "Without me, ye can do nothing." And part of Jesus' final words were, "Without me, you can't." He told them in John 15, "Abide in me, and ye are I am the vine, ye are the branches." And as we are the branches, we have to abide in Christ if we're to bear fruit. And apart from Christ, we can do nothing. And apart from God's grace, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, we are weak. We will be fruitless. We will be barren. Our lives will just be completely desolate of His grace. And perhaps you've seen a fruit tree at some point that is completely barren and has no fruit on it. And you think, well, what is the point of this tree existing? Exactly. And what is the point of that tree existing? And we as Christians are to bear fruit. And so he says, "Be strong, Timothy. Thou therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus." And as Christians, that is where we need to be strong, in God's grace. God's grace is flowing through us. We are allowing God's grace. And we are taking advantage of the grace. God's grace is always enough for the temptations. God's grace is always enough for the trials. God's grace is always enough to bear fruit. God's grace is always enough. His grace is always sufficient. And God's grace is always made perfect in our weakness. And God's grace is what we need. And apart from God's grace, we're barren. We struggle with our carnal appetites, our sin. And many churches die because of carnal Christians. There's carnal Christianity in it. And quite frankly, it's because we as Christians are not, we're being given the grace, but we're not appropriating the grace correctly. We're not using the grace like we ought to. And so we're to be strong. We're to take God's grace and we're to be conduits. We're to channel God's grace out to other people. And we're to bear fruit in that way. And in verse 2, this is our ministry verse. He says, "And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also." And so if we're strong in God's grace, if we're strong, and Timothy here was a pastor in Ephesus. And if he was strong in God's grace, what was he to do? Paul told, and in verse 2, by the way, Look at verse 2. He says, the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. There's 4 generations in that verse. 4. Okay? Paul said, the things that thou hast heard of me, okay, that thou, Timothy, hast heard of me, Paul, among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. So, Paul passed on to Timothy. He trained Timothy. He mentored Timothy. Timothy was his son in the faith. He found Timothy as a young man, and he brought him along, and he trained Timothy. He mentored Timothy. And Paul told Timothy, just like I've trained you, you need to find faithful men. One person by himself is not enough. Okay? You have to multiply your efforts. You have to invest in people. When Jesus was on this earth, sure there were the multitudes, but at the end of the day, who is he pouring himself into? 12 men. 12 men that were going to turn the world upside down with the gospel of Jesus Christ after his ascension. 12 men. Now, ultimately 11 of them, because one of them betrayed him. But 12 men is who he mentored. It's who he spent the most time with. It's who he really poured himself into, who he invested in. And so he said, you need to find faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. And this is what was set up by Jesus Christ himself when he came to earth. And he had there with the Great Commission. And this is sort of where I want to go. When we talk about missions, we see Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts. Okay, in those 5 books, we see what we call the Great Commission. The Great Commission. And Jesus came to earth and to seek and to save that which was lost. That was why Jesus came. And the paralytic that was brought to him, they lowered him down through the roof so they could get this man to Jesus to be healed. And before Jesus healed the man so he could walk, Jesus forgave him of his sins. And his spiritual state was more important to Jesus than his physical state. And that was what Jesus came for. The woman at the well was thirsty in John chapter 4. But Jesus knew that really what this woman needed was not the physical water in that well, but he needed the drink of the living water. And so, Susie, I'm sorry to interrupt. Were you supposed to come up here and give a testimony right now? Or was it supposed to be in the main service? Oh, right now? Okay. So better make sure we do that. Are you ready to go? Okay. My wife, I'm sorry, my wife is going to come up here and give her testimony before I go any further. And just come on up here. I'll just stand next to you.
So my name is Susie, and I was saved when I was 7 years old. I grew up in a Christian family. I actually grew up in a missionary family. So my dad was a missionary to Russia for 3.5 years, and then God moved us over to Hungary, and so he was there for 10 years. So I grew up as a missionary kid, watching my parents as missionaries on the mission field, and I asked Jesus to come into my heart when I was 7 years old. And growing up in a missionary home, sometimes I saw all the blessings and sometimes all the heartaches that came along with it. And as a missionary kid, in my heart, I told God, especially when I got to my teenage years and getting ready to go to college, then I told God, I will serve you, but I will serve you in America. And I went to Florida Baptist College to study to be a teacher. But it was during my college years that I felt God working on my heart because I was not ready to go to the mission field. And one chapel service, I was sitting there and I knew that God was calling me to the mission field, and so I went forward and I told God, I will go wherever you want me to go and do whatever you want me to do. And as soon as I graduated from college, then I heard about Honduras and the ministry there. And so without ever having been to the ministry there, then I got in the airplane and I went down there to the ministry, and I was working there as a teacher, teaching in the Christian school there. And I worked there for 4 years, and after 4 years then I felt that that maybe God wanted me to go back to the States and teach in a Christian school in the States. But I wasn't sure, and so I told God, well, I'm going to come back for 1 more year, and if my life is totally miserable, I'll know you want me to leave. And so I stayed for that year, and that very next year that my husband James came down, which was not my husband yet, but he came down to the same ministry, and he was working in the ministry there. And so we started talking and fell in love and got married. But it's just such a blessing to see how God uses things in your life to move you to his perfect will. And they're not always easy, sometimes the things that he puts into your path, but you just got to trust God. My life verse is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Because sometimes you don't know what's happening and you can't see. I thought I had my life figured out in Bible college and what I was going to do and who I was going to marry, but that wasn't God's will. And I'm so thankful that he intervened in my life and showed me that his will, because his blessings in my life I'm so thankful for them. So thankful for God and what he's doing in Honduras right now. Just having the opportunity to see kids get saved, to see teenagers get saved, to see adults get saved. We have one lady on our bus route that she was pregnant the same time I was pregnant, and we would go and visit her, and she would say, when I have my baby, I'm going to come to church with you guys. And in the back of my head, I was like, sure you are. Everyone says that, but they don't come. But after she had her baby the exact same day that I had my baby. I had my baby at 6 in the morning. She had her baby at 2 in the afternoon. But it's so neat to watch God work in her life, and she did come to church, and she did get saved. And even her boyfriend has come to church and gotten saved, and they're both baptized, and they're excited about coming to church and having their little boy grow up in church. They're so excited when he gets things in church. Like when we have this promotion for, like, because in Honduras it's a very poor country, so we have a promotion for little kids getting shoes. And so he got his first pair of shoes a couple months ago. We were here in the States, but she called me up and she told me, and I got to see his shoes. But they're so excited to have their kid grow up in church, and they want to get married, so we're praying for them to get married. But it's so neat to watch God take one person and totally change their life around. And I'm so excited to be serving my husband there. But thank you.
Amen.
And so, but no, my wife, I mean, and really, my wife went down there single. There's a lot of churches, and I don't mean to, every pastor has to do what he sees fit, as far as, a lot of pastors won't support single lady missionaries that are going out if they're not married, and they're not, they won't support a missionary who's not going to go and specifically plant churches. I mean, if you're not going to start churches up, and if you're not going to do that, then we're not going to support you. But I mean, there's so many areas of the world, and I mean, if you just look in the history of missions, I mean, Mary Slessor, okay, who's the woman who went to India? Amy Carmichael, yes, Amy Carmichael, and there's a long history, and really, you talk to a lot of missionaries out there on the field, and especially in a lot of third world countries. A lot of times when a church gets started in a third world country, most of the people you're going to have at the beginning of your church are women and children. That's going to be your church, and you might get a few men. Quite frankly, men a lot of times, especially in Latin American countries, a lot of times they're alcoholics. A lot of times they're have different addictions they're struggling with, and they're just spiritually they're in need of a lot of help. Not to say we shouldn't work with them when we can't work with them, but the reality is when you start a church, usually most of the people you have are women and children. That's almost in you go to any church anywhere in the mission field, if you go within the first few years of its existence, you're going to find them. That's most of the people in the church, and so a lot of times when females, ladies, are a lot more effective with women and children than men are. That's just the reality. When I went down there, I started working on a bus route, and if the men weren't drunk, if they were sober, I would talk to them. But then there was the ladies. I remember one time trying to get this lady to send her kids to church, and I just was talking to her, and I was trying to really convince her to let her kids come, and nothing. After about 10 minutes, nothing. I went back to the bus and I said, nah, she doesn't want to send her kids today to church. And one of our Honduran ladies said, let me go talk to her. And I'm not even kidding you, within 5 minutes, all the kids came out to the bus. And I said, what did you say to her? But that's just the reality of it. I mean, ladies will, and especially Hondurans, they know how to connect to Hondurans, and ladies know how to talk to ladies. And so there's just that reality. And so women can be a lot more effective on the mission field, can aid missionaries so much when they're starting a church. And I've known of several different missionary works that were very effective. And in part, it's because they had some good ladies that came from America to help support the ministry there and and get a lot of new blood in the church, a lot of kids, and they just have had so much of an impact. So looking at what ladies can do, I don't think, and from what we read in 1 Corinthians 7, it's necessarily God's will for every single person to get married. Paul said, if you can remain even as I am, Paul remained single. And he said, in other words, in so many words he said, if you're not desiring to get married, I mean, it may be that God wants you to be single, but if you're single, that means you can serve God so much more freely than you could if you were married. And so you have so much more liberty to serve God as a single person. So a lot of times our society is always putting that pressure on people to get married, or there's just this pressure to do that. And it may not be that the person needs to get married. It may be that God's will could be for them to be single. And maybe God's will for them to be single so they can fully give themselves over to the ministry more. And so, I look at my wife. She went down there single, and there's a lot of other single ladies that have gone down, and don't ever despise that. That is, so many different women have, and I think when we get to heaven, we're going to find a lot of the heroes of the faith were single ladies that went out in the middle of the jungles, or went out in different areas of the world where no one would go, and they gave their lives giving out the gospel to people. And it was really Jim Elliot. If you know the story of the Auca Indians, when Jim Elliot and several of the men, I'm kind of fuzzy on some of the details, but when they went out to Ecuador, they were trying to go out to an area of Ecuador up in the mountains where a primitive Indian group lived up there called the Auca Indians. And their goal was to try to reach the Auca Indians, but they were very suspicious. They had never seen a white person before. They didn't know what they were doing before. And eventually, the story goes that they got ambushed and they were killed with spears. And the wives of these men, and the only way they could get to the Auca Indians was to take a small airplane out there and land on a strip of sand or dirt. That was where they landed, and that was how they tried to reach this primitive group of people. And they ended up getting killed in the process. And their wives, and the story is incredible, after that, the wives, instead of getting bitter at God, they said, we're going to go where those men killed our husbands, and we're going to go try to reach them with the gospel. And they did. Even the chief of the Indians there could not believe that these women, after what they had done to their husbands, would go there. I mean, and that they would go there and not only forgive them, but want to see them come to Christ. What an incredible thing. That those women who weren't married anymore because their husbands had gone on to be with the Lord, but those women said, we're going to go, and those women did what their husbands were not able to do. But because of what their husbands did, it opened the door and prepared the way for them to accept Christ. And till this day, Christianity is now, there are Auca Indians in that area of Ecuador who are Christians because of what those women, the faith of those women, what they've done. So it is incredible to see what people have done throughout the history of missions and what they give their lives to do. And that ought to challenge us, by the way. A lot of times we want to complain about things. And I was telling my wife, I said, I said to my wife, we're talking about the heat and how hot it is. We have a tendency to complain about the heat. I said, I wonder if sometimes the children of Israel, the ones that traveled in the desert for 40 years, I wonder if some of them are looking down from heaven and just shaking their heads going, wimps? You guys are wimps. I mean, you can't even handle that little bit of heat. Man, we went out in that desert for 40 years, man. For 40 years, we stuck it out, man. And you guys are complaining about a little bit of heat. You guys don't know what heat is. And sometimes I wonder if people from heaven can see these things and are thinking, man, you guys are wimps. You guys are weak. And anyway, so this is our ministry. Our ministry is to train nationals, and we have a video. Hopefully we'll be able to show it in the during the main service hour. But it's to see nationals go out and start churches, Hondurans. And of course, thinking about this, for American to go, a person from the United States who doesn't speak any Spanish, to go to a foreign country, start a work. I mean, you think about it, it's between raising support. You got to raise support. You got to go over there, try to deal with immigration, all the paperwork of visas and all that, and then you got to try to learn the language and learn the culture. So there's a lot of hoops you got to jump through just to be a missionary on a foreign field. Now, a national who already lives there, and even after jumping through all those hoops, you jump through all these hoops, raising the money, learning the language, learning the culture, and getting the visas and all that. Even after all of that, there's times that I jump through, and I'm almost jumped through all the hoops as far as I'm still learning more about the culture. But even after all that, I know our pastor with whom we work down there, he has jumped through all the hoops. And even still, there's a little bit of well, that's our pastor can get up behind the pulpit and say certain things, and there might be certain sins that Hondurans that they struggle with. But at the end of the day, a lot of Hondurans will look at our pastor and go, "Yeah, well, you're a white guy. You're from America, and what do you know? And you're not Honduran." Now, we have an assistant pastor who is Honduran, who grew up in our ministry. He graduated from our Bible college. His name is Moises Zelaya. Now, he could get up behind the pulpit and say the exact, word for word, the exact same thing our pastor just said. And it's just accepted so much more because he's Honduran. Because they don't see him as an outsider. He's one of them. And if he goes, "Look, guys, we as Hondurans, we really struggle with this. We have big problems in this area." And they're all shaking. "You know what? You're right. We do." And it's like our pastor just got done saying that. What was the difference? Well, the difference is he's one of them, and so when he says it, it's taken more like, okay, yeah, he's one of us. And so, I don't know if you're understanding the point I'm driving at. And so nationals, they don't have to go through any of those hoops. They already live, they already understand. They're a lot more effective to reach their own people and to disciple and to train their own people. And so that's the point I'm driving at. And so that is our goal, is to train nationals. And really our ministry has become, we feel like a training ground by God's grace. And please, don't take what I'm saying as bragging. It's all by God's grace. To God be the glory. It's become a training ground, and a lot of people already have been going out and come into our ministry to train and go out. And Lord willing, we'll be able to see a lot more things going forward. Of course, we know the adversary, the devil, walks about as a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. And so we know we need to be careful to guard ourselves and whatnot. But just be in prayer. Please feel free to grab a prayer card. And we also have a little notebook on the table. How many of you, I'm just curious, have an email address? A few of you? Okay. How many of you don't know what an email address is? No, I'm just kidding. Don't raise your hand. What is an email address? But if you have an email address and you want to, we have a little notebook, and you can write your email address down if you want to receive our prayer letters. We will include your email on our prayer letter list. We send out a prayer letter once every 2 months. And so if you want to receive it, and you can read it and see what's going on. But also, if you want to just contact us, just email us. Our email address is on the back of the prayer card. So please feel free to go by, grab one of our prayer cards. If you have an email address, write it down. And if you want to play with one of the toys on the table, we got a couple Honduran toys you can try to play with, see how good your coordination is. And but feel free to go by there and also look through the pictures in the yearbook. Did anybody have any questions while we're here? Did anybody have any questions about it? Yes, ma'am.
What is your position in the church?
I'm the director of a seminary, captain of a bus route, teacher in the bilingual school. We have a bilingual school, and really just on the pastoral staff to help out with anything in the church that needs to be done. So. But my main thing, my main focus that consumes most of my time is being the director of the seminary, just running the affairs of the Bible college, making sure everything's going well, trying to get the enrollment up, or keep the enrollment up. We're trying to, a couple summers ago, I guess back in the summer of 2018, was that when we did tour group? I think it was 2018. We took a group of our Bible college students, and this is something that's that Bible colleges in the United States do that nobody really does outside of in Honduras is take a group of young people from the Bible college, get some good songs to sing, and then go and try to promote the Bible college. And so we did that one summer, trying to get our name more out there. That we know of, and the reason our pastor. Okay, so let me give you a little timeline. The church that we're at was started in 1998. Okay, the New Life Baptist Church. Our pastor and his wife, they started a bilingual school in 2006. And it was mainly because they didn't want to homeschool their kids, but they wanted to start a Christian school. And they wanted a Christian school that could be more of a ministry. Teaching English is a way to get into more homes. I mean, it attracts more people. When you tell people, we're going to teach your kids how to speak English. So that has given us more of an opportunity to evangelize not only the kids, but the homes that these kids come from. And so the bilingual school was started in 2006, and then the seminary was started in 2010. Prior to our seminary starting in 2010, we had already had a couple of our young people go off to Bible college in another country, actually in the country of Panama. And so our pastor was like, we got, if I'm sending our young people all the way off to Panama, which if you look at a map, Panama is a good ways away from Honduras. I mean, you have to go through Nicaragua and Costa Rica. And Central America is a very mountainous area, so to travel that far, it takes a while. And so he thought, well, if we're sending our young people all the way to Panama to go to a Bible college, why don't we start a Bible college here in Honduras? And so the Bible college was started in 2010, and my testimony is I ended up getting down to Honduras because I went on a missions trip back in 2014. By the way, let me just throw this out there. Did you know that God calls a lot of people to the mission field? And he uses, the first thing he uses is a mission trip. I mean, a short, innocent, 1 to 2 week mission trip. And now you don't believe me, okay? You don't believe that. We've been traveling around, and my wife and I will be part of different missions conferences. And I've been listening, and I haven't done the survey yet. But it is, I would say, maybe half or more than half of all the missionaries that end up on the field, God uses a mission trip first to call them to the mission field. I mean, it's incredible. So this is my promo for mission trips. Take one. Take a mission trip. If you can. I understand not everybody can, but boy, you are missing out if you don't. If you can take a mission trip, save up money for it. If it takes you a couple years to save up for one, and some mission fields are easier to get to than others. Puerto Rico is a mission field you don't have to get a passport for. It's a territory of the United States. Puerto Rico might be an option to consider, but there's other countries, Mexico. You could actually drive to Mexico from here and go to, there's different ministries in Mexico. Go down to Monterrey, Mexico, different areas like that. But those are mission fields that might be a little more within a budget. And so I want to encourage you. If God doesn't call you to the mission field, and by the way, God, we ran into a couple that had grandkids. They had grandkids, and God called them. I mean, they left their employment, they left their job, they left everything behind to go start a church in the Philippines, on an island in the Philippines that has no church. And they already have grandkids. God called an older couple that already had grandkids to go start a church in the Philippine Islands. I believe God can call anybody at any age. He can, and I think He does. But so I want to encourage you and if nothing else, if God doesn't call you, it will. I mean, there is no substitute for just being there, seeing it, experiencing it. I mean, God will open your heart more to missions. You will want to pray more for missions. You will want to give more. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. So I just want to encourage you to do that. And so take a mission trip if you can. And it doesn't necessarily. And it could be you take a mission trip to a shorter one that's closer by. And it could be something within the United States. But I would encourage you to take, if you can take a mission trip to a foreign country, to take one. And you will not regret it. If you have kids, one of the things you can do for your kids, a really good thing is that's a life changer for your kids, is to take them to a foreign field and let them see some kids living in a house made of adobe. I mean, you know what adobe is? It's bricks made of mud, dried up mud, and that they make bricks out of. It's the cheapest kind of bricks you can get is adobe bricks, and they make houses out of this stuff. A house out of dried up mud. I mean, it's crazy. and then they'll put a really thin tin roof on. And it's a very small house, and they'll have a little outhouse out front where they use the bathroom, and another little area out front where they take a shower. And you're not going to get, if you ask them to use the bathroom, you're not going to get the most privacy. That's just what it is in these countries. But I tell you, you take your kids to one of these places, they will come back, and instead of feeling entitled, like everybody owes them something, or instead of having a complaining attitude, it'll rock their world. It'll change their perspective. They'll say, wow, God has been so good to us here in America. And so if you're raising kids and you want something to help you in your endeavor to raise kids, take them to the foreign field. That will, and it could be God calls one of your kids to the field. And by the way, what a great thing that God would choose to call one of your kids to the mission field. That ought to be promoted. And a lot of times, I've seen in some churches where there's a lot of missionaries that go out of a church, and then there's a lot of other churches where no missionaries ever go out. You know what the difference maker is? Because it all depends on your heroes. Some churches really focus a lot on sports, and the kids' heroes are Michael Jordan. Michael, that's a long time ago. Kids' heroes, I don't know, Tom Brady. Who's down here? Who's the Dak Prescott? I don't know. I don't know who the kids' heroes are today. But these sports heroes, I mean, that's who they look up to. That's who they want to be like. You ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you go to the churches where they have a lot of missionaries that go out of those churches, and you ask the kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a missionary. There's a reason for that, because that's what they put in front of the kids all the time, and that's who they promote as heroes. Not that we're anybody special, but that's why they end up becoming missionaries. You go to other churches that all they do is talk about sports. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a football player. Okay? Well, that's what's promoted to the kid, and that's what he wants to be one day. He wants to be a football player. Okay? And if that's God's will, but I mean that's why you get what you promote, you get what you emphasize. And so take your kids to the mission field. So I've said all that. Did anybody have any more questions? Yes.
Could you start over? I missed the first part.
Which part? I don't know where you left.
So you're over all this. What does your wife do? I mean,
My wife?
You're over all this in the.
Well, she helps me with what I do. She does. I mean, we've had two little girls over the last couple of years, and they're both real small. So she was teaching in the bilingual school for a number of years. She was a second grade teacher. She might go back to that here pretty soon. We're not sure about it yet. But we felt that both of our girls were born in Honduras, and in both cases they were a C-section. And prior to our first daughter being born, I had no idea when the doctor said we're going to have to do a C-section. I had no idea what that entailed. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, how much the recovery was. You're ignorant, you're green, wet behind the ears. You just don't know. And so I didn't know. And I thought, man, after our first daughter was born, I thought, whoa, C-sections are serious deals. I mean, it was a good 6 months before my wife and I could, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months before we could even throw a Frisbee. I mean, she couldn't even throw a Frisbee hardly for about 2 or 3 months, and I thought, man, alive. I mean, that C-section it really messed up her body. And so, but then Annabelle was another C-section, so with both of those, we've, tried to just take it easy for her, and also just kind of being so little and nursing and everything, we thought, well, we'll just, you can stay at home for now and just kind of take care of them. But she has done a lot to help me out with the seminary, and a lot of times it's the little things that, a lot of times men aren't detail oriented. She will go and we'll be in the capital city, and so she'll say, hey, let's get some stuff to buy for the seminary students before Christmas break or before the summer break. And so she'll put together gift bags for our seminary students, which makes me look good because I come with all these gift bags and they think, hey, our director cares about us. He made us all these. And I tell them it wasn't me, it was my wife. If it wasn't for my wife, believe me, you guys wouldn't be getting anything. But it's a woman's touch. She really adds a woman's touch, and so little things like that. She really helps out with our bus route. She does a lot of things with our bus route to help out and help just with a lot of little details that, again, a lot of times men just tend to overlook certain things, but she kind of brings to my attention, and so she's been a big blessing in that way. But she might go back to teaching in the bilingual school here pretty soon. If she does, it would just be half days, and so we'll wait and see what the Lord wants us to do. So.
The language there is what, Spanish?
Spanish. Spanish. Anybody else, any other questions? All right. I think it's 5 till, so I think we can go ahead and take a break for the morning service. And please, avail yourself of the table, and we'd love to make conversation. Thank you.
Amen.